Good afternoon and welcome to the show. It's another edition of Swinging for the Fences. I am Steve Silver along with We Are Selling But Still In It, Swanson. You're still in it, huh, bud?
Apparently they're still in it, but we're not adding anything to the team.
No, we're not. I'm
right
sorry,
there.
For all those that
we're still in wild card range.
Yeah, for all those guys that geeked out, over Shohei Ohtani at the All-Star break and the chance of, come to Seattle, that ain't happening, folks.
Yeah.
It's absolutely not happening. But a pretty good afternoon, I got to say. And, of course, today is Mariner Mondays. And so today's trivia question, it's kind of an easy one, though. The today's question, it's pretty simple. The double. When we all talk about the double, we know exactly who we're talking about.
Sure.
Okay. Game 5, the American League Divisional Series, 1995. Of course, Edgar hits the double. That scores Cora, scores Junior. If Edgar didn't get the double, who was on deck?
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I've used that trivia question before.
I know I've used that
exactly
before, and it's actually for those Mariner fans that have been around. I'm sure this one's actually going to be an easy one, but
probably because he's in the pictures. But it's a good question because it's one of those, you got to look into it. It's one of those you'll be surprised. It's kind of who was on deck when Hank Aaron hit his 755th home run. 756th home run.
Well, here's a good one, right? You remember? Okay, we weren't around when this happened, but the shot heard around the world is Bobby Thompson.
Sure.
And the Giants win the pennant. The Giants win the pennant. But if Bobby Thompson didn't hit it, who was on deck?
Willie Mays.
Willie Mays, a young Willie Mays was on deck.
The Polo Grounds.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we have a great show lined up for you today because Mariner president of operations Jerry Dipoto came out and made some very interesting comments this week. And I got to be honest with you, I on one hand I appreciated the candidness, but then
finally
the other comments that he made, you can't help but just say typical Mariners.
Yeah.
It just is what it is, and and then of course it's almost contradictory because then Scott Service goes public and talks about how they're in it. But that being said, you have two entities. You have president of baseball operations and you have the manager saying two different things. It almost leaves Mariner fans confused as to what is going to happen. But we're going to get into that. So let's just start from the top because the Seattle Mariners had a 10-game homestand. To kick off the second half, they start by losing 2 out of 3 to Detroit. They split with Minnesota, and then they take 2 out of 3 from Toronto. I don't know if about you. They seem to have Toronto's number. I'm not necessarily surprised about the Toronto series. Because whether we're in Toronto or whether in Seattle, they just, over the course of the last 2 seasons, they just seem to play well against Toronto. But they looked flat against Minnesota. They looked flat against Detroit. And we are basically where, we started the 10-game homestand. We finished it just as we started it, right around 500. There's been no movement. I think they picked up a game. And that's not going to cut it. I'm sorry. If this team wants to be a serious, in my opinion, I don't think they're a playoff team right now. But if they want to be taken seriously, we're talking at least a 7-game winning streak, if not better.
Yeah.
To put themselves right back into the thick of things, because it just right when they take two steps forward, Chris, they just take 2 steps backwards again, and they are where they've been all season.
Well, they are now 50-49. They're a game over 500, which is where they were when they took 3 or 4 from Houston right before the All-Star break.
Yep.
So essentially, no ground has been made up. No ground has been made up. If you want to reach that 92 wins, our new math calculation that we're working on.
New math
on the Swing for the Fences show. They got to go 40.
I'll tell you what, man.
It's the same story the last 4 shows we've done. They got to go 42-21 the rest of the way. They got to win 2 out of 3 every series. And when you come out and you shit the bed against Detroit, we talked about that last year, that's bad. And then you got Minnesota, and 2 of 3 and looked lifeless in that 4-game series. Until the day game when George Kirby came out and pitched his tail off and got him that win. And then all of a sudden, the hype train starts. This is what we needed to jumpstart us. Then they win 2 games against the Blue Jays. That, frankly, one of them, that Friday night's game, they were lifeless until the 7th inning, and they managed to grind out. Good on them. They managed to grind out a 3-2 win on there, and then it was that back and forth. Maybe the most entertaining game of the season was Saturday, where they got the early lead, they lost the early lead, got the lead back, almost lost the lead again. 3 home run inning for both teams. Mariners in the second inning, and then Toronto in the 5th. Only 6th time in Major League history that both teams have had 3 home runs in an inning in the same game. I thought that was pretty good. And then they go out yesterday and really piss away a winnable game. But I think it goes back to what you said, what you've said a few times this season is they really do play down to their competition. And then they have an ability to play up to their competition again. I think that the series against the Rays late last month is a perfect example of that. So they can play up when it's time to play up. That's why this series with Boston is going to be interesting coming up here pretty soon. Are they going to be able to play up to them? Or if they go to Minnesota first, are they going to lose 2 of 3 there? I mean, if they win 2 of 3 there, watch out, because it turns into a we won the series type of thing. But I think it goes back to what you said. They play down to the competition, they play up to the competition. Essentially, no ground has been made up. So how in the fuck this was a win? This homestand was a successful homestand, which that word got used yesterday in post in the locker room. Our cameras caught it. It was a successful homestand. You went 5-5. Your opportunity was right there. You needed to go 8-2. He probably should have went 8-2.
That is what's so that's what gets me so angry about this ball club, because under no circumstances should they have lost 2 out of 3 to Detroit. Detroit is not a good baseball team. Being out here in Michigan, I have watched a lot of Tigers baseball this season. They're not good. They came into that. Yeah, we should have swept them. They came into that series 11 games under 500. Their all-star has almost a 5 ERA.
And he looked like Cy Young in that game.
And he looked like Cy Young. And then they play a Minnesota team, I believe they came in in first place. But
barely.
But you know what?
We're talking games over 500 in first place.
Yeah, they're exactly where you are. Yeah. And the Twins gave them hell all series long. They gave them hell. And then all of a sudden, Kirby goes out there and pitches a dandy. I think they won 5-0 in that game. And then the next 2 against Toronto, although the second game in Toronto, their bullpen got lit up. But they still managed to, hold on. And then, yesterday, unbelievable. Like, I don't, again, another opportunity to win the game in the 9th, and they're just not clutch. So
there was.
It's baffling, and so now we get now that we get the Twins again for 3, we get the Arizona Diamondbacks for 3, then we come home against Boston for 3, and then we get the Angels for 4. Like the next 2 weeks is a brutal stretch.
It's almost the point where
it's a very brutal stretch.
You would think I'm surprised I didn't hear this term yesterday in any radio or TV broadcast, but it's almost the time for somebody to say, we're going to learn a lot about this team here in the next 10 days, which I've heard.
By the way, man, don't get me started on Mariner media.
Yeah, you're going to learn a lot about this team. We just learned a lot about this team in the last 10 days. They said that during the All-Star break. We learned. They went 5-5, and they played down to their competition. That's not the first time that's happened. How much more are we going to learn about this team? They are who they are. I mean, right now you're looking at 84 wins.
How many months of the season do you need to watch this baseball team to not know what they're about? I mean, Christ, Dipoto, and I know this is a great segue. Dipoto said it himself. He said it himself And he says right here, I do think that we've seen some up and downs from that young group, but that's almost to be expected. We needed stability from our veterans, and that's where we've fallen a little short this year, is the combination of evolving young players who at times have wobbled and veterans who have generally not quite been quite what they've always been. Period.
Yeah.
You had by the way, and it's not just the Julio Rodriguez and the Cal Raleighs of the world and the Jared Kelnicks coming back to earth, but it's also proven, I still consider Ty a very young player, but Ty France has had the worst drop off out of all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Compared to his power peripherals over the last 2 seasons, and you compare it to he's having a career worst year. This is the worst year of his career that he's having right here. And then you add those veterans that they tried to bring in, the Teoscar Hernandez, the AJ Pollocks of the world.
Yeah. He's a poster child for regression right now. I mean, I thought it was going to be Julio. I would have said Julio, but no, it's Ty France. I mean, this is a guy that was an all-star this year or last year, and now I'm looking going, good Lord, I mean, maybe it's time to start sitting him a few more games. I mean, he had that stretch where he homered on opening night, and he didn't homer for a month.
He didn't homer
Which
for
I know
a month.
home runs are not the end-all, be-all, but you're playing first base, and if you're hitting 2 through 5 in the lineup, you're supposed to pop a couple out. But when AJ Pollock has as many, not anymore, but when AJ Pollock has more home runs than you for the majority of the season, that's a problem. I mean, you're sucking hind wind. 249 average. The OPS is 691. That is right now, I'm in the season, he's still got some time. That's the worst of his career. He's still positive WAR, barely. It's a 0.4. But, I mean, to call it anything but a disappointment would be an understatement.
Well, the crazy thing is it's more than just the home runs, right? Because Ty France, when I think of Ty France, I see a gap-to-gap hitter. I see a guy that lives and dies by the double, so he's not getting the extra base hits. But what's even more alarming is the fact that he was good against the bad pitch, and he actually had a positive rate against the slider. And not only is he's
routinely swinging and missing at pitches.
100%.
I mean, bad. Everybody's chasing things that are off the plate, but he's routinely swinging and missing at stuff that's right over the middle of the plate. So he's getting fooled on off speed, or he's getting
100%.
backdoored or front doored on curveballs or on breaking balls.
The crazy thing, he was a good bad pitch hitter, but his 2 pitches that he feasted the most were against the sinker and the slider. And I was, as a matter of fact, I was reading this today that he was a +8 last year against the sinker, and he's now a -2 this year, which means he's not even his barrel rate on that pitch just isn't there. And the slider, I think he was a +9 last year. I think he's now a -3, which means that his whiff rate went from 8% to 16% this year. You're absolutely right. He's just there's no feel, and when you watch him in his at bat, he looks uncomfortable.
Yes. Is that on the hit? You got to put that on the hitting coach, or somewhere
Maybe.
along those lines.
I hear that all the time. But that being said, and
he's been around long enough.
That's exactly right. There's some validity to the hitting coach. But that being said, though, good players stay ahead of the curve. Right? Good players understand that pitchers are going to work to them different. So you actually have to spend some time pre-game looking at pitchers and trying to figure out patterns of how they're going to pitch to you so you can stay ahead of it. So you're not chasing sliders. I think the accountability would also be on the player. Also, the pitching coach, if they're not doing that either, if they're not studying trends and patterns and pitchers, then 100% that also lies on the hitting coach as well too. But Jerry Dipoto, I mentioned it. I just mentioned it just a second ago, but I gotta say, Chris, I actually appreciated the fact that he's holding himself accountable for the fact that the veterans that he brought in to augment his young core. Now, he wouldn't go so far as to put the blame on his young core. As a matter of fact, he said that they're still evolving. And I think there might be some truth
Aren't we
to
all?
that as well too. Yeah, exactly. We're day to day, but aren't we all? But there might be some truth to that. But at least he had the stones, he had the balls to come out publicly and say that it's on him.
I was stunned.
He
I was
did.
stunned
He did
actually
not.
did it, and I was stunned that Scott Service followed that suit too. But then there was a little bit of a pivot by the end of the week.
Well,
We'll
go
get to
ahead,
that
man.
later.
Yeah, I was gonna say, don't bore us. Just come with the chorus, man. Tell me
Yeah.
what the pivot is. No, the
basically, you know, we're selling, but we're still in it.
you're
I mean,
selling,
that
but we're
was
still.
you know, yeah, things haven't worked out. I do appreciate his candor in that. It's long overdue, and holding himself accountable. I gotta laugh every time I hear somebody from the Mariners say, "I'm holding myself accountable." I rewind back to Howard Lincoln. I think back in I think it was 2008, where he quote unquote put himself on the hot seat. It's okay. You're gonna fire yourself, and I know
No.
like people. The response on that was kind of the beginning of social media, beginning of Facebook
Right.
at least.
Right.
I just remember that was when memes were starting to become a thing. And I remember somebody had there's an outline meme of Neil deGrasse Tyson like going like this, and the caption was, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, hold on, we got a badass over here," and it was funny because you know, that was the thought. I'm holding myself accountable. I'm on the hot seat too, and this is also during the time of, you know, and not too long after that, Sonics leave, the whole thing about an arena downtown. The Mariners, that was a couple years later, granted, the Mariners helped put the kibosh on that with the port. And I mean, it was really, that guy, it's like, you talk about digging your own grave. It's like he had 4 arms and 2 shovels. He couldn't make it right. So when I hear Dipoto say that, I appreciate his candor. I appreciate him stepping up and saying that. But then again, you know, it's easier to make those comments when your owner's not going to really hold you accountable. I mean, if they win somewhere in the 80s this year and fail to make the playoffs, I don't think he loses his job. And maybe he shouldn't. Maybe it's just a back year, I think. But I think next off season, this coming off season is massively key. And if he fucks that up again, like he did the last one, then he's got to be gone. If they're really serious about winning, because you can't take the steps they made after 2019 and then regress like this.
I don't.
You know, we got plenty of time to talk about who they should go after and who they should trade for and stuff like that. We can talk about who they should start getting rid of, which I know we're gonna talk about, given the fact that the trade deadline is basically a week from today, as we tape this on July 24th.
Yeah, I don't think Dipoto even if he fucks up this upcoming offseason, I just feel like, okay, so he was hired as a GM and then was promoted to president of baseball ops. He's entrenched.
Yeah.
He is entrenched.
You'd almost have to fire himself.
You would, like, the only way that happens is if he follows up this season with a 90-loss season. Like an embarrassing 90-loss season. But I mean, if it's still this type of 500
and that's not
season,
impossible. That is not impossible.
A lot of things would have to go wrong.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like 90 loss seasons are hard to come by. I mean, I know the Mariners have done a really good job of proving that. They've done a very good job of proving that wrong, but it's not easy to lose 90 games. A lot of things have to go wrong. Here's what I will say though, and this is where I give Jerry Dipoto credit, because he's done 2 things in my mind that have let me know that he is willing to hold himself accountable. The first one was the Jesse Winker debacle. This last offseason, without saying it, after 1 season, he ships him out to Milwaukee.
Yeah.
He recognized it was bad. That it was bad. Not only was it bad baseball, but it was bad, bad for the clubhouse, whatever the case may be, and he had no problem shipping out Winker. And to me, that said a lot without saying a lot, that he's willing to say, you know what? I made a mistake. Let's rectify it. And then of course this right here, where he's saying, like, you know what? Yeah, I guess I didn't do enough. I guess the moves this offseason weren't good enough to we didn't do enough to augment it. and we're willing to acknowledge it. But so then the next question is what are you going to do about it? Like we have a perfect opportunity to right the wrongs this trading deadline, and then we hear Jerry Dipoto going on his weekly radio show on 710 ESPN saying that it's not off the table. Selling is not off the table. You hear GM say that, yeah, we'll listen to anybody. We'll listen to any offer. And he's basically saying that, listen, man, selling is not off the table. Like, you would have to be a fool to keep that off the table. But wait a second. Didn't you say at the beginning of this, going into the season, that you felt this was a World Series caliber team?
ALCS. I mean, that's what they were talking back in Arizona in the spring training.
Well, exactly, right. So
and
if
they
you
were
thought
saying that, and it's not impossible after last year.
If you thought your team was that good, then what are you doing talking about selling? So my question is has Dipoto waving the white flag? Is he at the point where he's seen enough to a point where he knows that even if he were to add somebody, that it would just basically be punting on the 2023 season? What is that cryptic quote? What does he mean by that's not off the table?
He hasn't waved the white flag. He has the white flag. Like, here's the white flag. He's got it down here. He's got it just out of view.
He's got it out
here.
of view.
It's ready to be pulled up when need be, but he's got it right down here, right out of view. To me, it was. He kind of talked out of both sides of his mouth, and Service was even worse this week. Who talks?
We're going to get into that
after
too.
every game, but it seemed like it was part honesty. They were also part making excuses for themselves.
Right.
Right. I really do think they were so waiting to see how this home series went, because as soon as they won 3 straight games, as if 3 games in a row is that big of a fucking deal that you need to go ballistic about. Suddenly that was oh wait, hold on now, we gotta take a look. Let's reevaluate. Maybe we're still in it. We just made up 2 games against the Blue Jays. You can't have it both ways. But I think what they're doing, is they're trying to wait another week to really see. But with a 5-5 homestand, and they're sitting right where they were, they basically made up no ground. I don't know how this is any better or different. I really don't. The white flag, he's got it in his right hand. It's just down here out of view. And I think it's 7 more days, depending on how things go, which, we're looking at probably a 4-3 or 3-4 week. Shocking. They'll be around 500. Then I think this pops up. But you really do need to look at, and I know you wanted to hit on this, but you really got to look at a Teoscar, at a Colton Wong, guys who are expiring contracts. Colton Wong, you might not get anything for. So you can let him go, and you're really not on the hook for much. Teoscar, thank God his bat came alive in the last 4 days. He's got some value there. I'd like to see him moved and get something for him. I frankly don't really care what it is, as long as somebody has a decent look on it.
I would probably think with Teoscar's track record, because it's not like this was his, this right here was an outlier year. Because if you look at his production standpoint in Toronto, he was amazing. He was absolutely amazing. And of course, if you put him in a lineup with protection in a hitting ballpark, he's probably going to return back to his Toronto days. Like, I'm 100% convinced of that. I think this was an ill-conceived, like, you bring in Teoscar Hernandez if you know that you got 3 guys in your lineup that are, that have had at least a 3 season track record of, hitting 280, hitting 290 with 25 home runs, that type of thing. Like, that's when you bring in a guy like Teoscar Hernandez. But I mean, the Mariners, when they got Teoscar Hernandez, I kept saying it's not what you guys are going to think. Like, he had Bo Bichette and Vlad Guerrero Jr. hitting in front of him and back of him.
And Alejandro Kirk is not a bad guy to have in your lineup either.
Oh, and the guy that and then Chapman, the third baseman they got from the A's. It was a different lineup. It was a different lineup dimension than coming to Seattle. So I would think that there's still going to be a tremendous amount of value. Now, are you going to be able to pull a top 5 prospect out of them? Probably not. Probably not. But that being said, you might be able to pick up a second baseman for the rest of the year. You might be able to pick up another outfielder now that Jared Kelenic kicked the water cooler. You might be able to find something like that. But I'll tell you what, if they trade and this came up this week as well too. Somebody asked Paul Sewald, how he felt about being in trade rumors, and I went apeshit. Because here's the thing, I understand that he's going to have value, but that being said, Paul Sewald's got another year left on his contract, and oh, by the way, if you feel like you're in contention, why would you trade your best reliever when your bullpen has been shaky already?
Yeah.
And I understand, three out of his, I think it was like 2 out of his last 4 appearances have been a little shaky himself, but he's still by far your best high leverage situation reliever. Yeah. Why would you trade him? If you feel like you're in contention, why?
And if he goes to a contending team where he doesn't have to be the closer, he's going to be once again a lights out 7th or 8th inning guy, like he's been before.
You mean like how the Mariners should have been using him to begin with in the first place?
Yes. Yes, and a guy who can come in, unlike Justin Topa, a guy that can come in the middle of an inning when there's 1 out or 2 outs and 2 guys on, and he gets 2 strikeouts. I put
you're protecting and you're protecting a 2-run lead, and they're threatening. He's what Andrew Miller was for the Indians back in 2016. Like the Indians Andrew Miller was a closer until he got to Cleveland, and then Terry Francona said, no. We're using you as a Swiss Army knife. We're going to bring you in to make sure that we protect leads. We got other guys at the back end of the bullpen that can handle it.
Okay, so speaking of that real quick, you brought up, in our trivia question, you brought up 1995, Mariners-Yankees. John Wetland, who ended up being World Series MVP the next year when he got 4 saves against the Braves in the 96 World Series. You want to take a stab at who his setup guy was in 95 and 96?
That would be the all-time saves leader, Mariano Rivera.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, speaking of which,
that's a hell of a setup guy.
Now, did you know that Mariano Rivera almost was a Mariner? Did you know that?
I heard that story, and my mouth was somewhere near the floor.
So they.
But we don't want to trade with the Yankees, Steve. They're the enemy.
Well, yeah, dude, don't even get me started, dude. those fans piss me off. But here's the story that they brought up Derek Jeter to sit on the bench during the 95 playoffs. They wanted him to get a feel for what the playoffs were going to be like, right? Mm-hmm. Coming into the 96 season, there was a lot of people, including George Steinbrenner, who felt that Derek Jeter might not be ready. And so he asked Brian Cashman to find out if there's any veteran shortstops that were going to be available, and Seattle had one. They were going to start the season with Derek Jeter in Columbus, and they were going to trade Mariano Rivera to the Seattle Mariners for Felix Fermin. But in the last week of spring training, Tony Fernandez broke his hand, solidifying Derek Jeter as their starting shortstop, and the rest is history.
Yeah, the rest is history. I think it's Baseball Doesn't Exist on YouTube. I think it's him. It's either him or somebody else. Has a good video about Derek Jeter, about how he wasn't as good defensively as Pete. It certainly was offensively. I mean, he's a Hall of Fame guy with the bat. There's no doubt about it. But how defensively, how overrated, how defensive metrics really just kind of kicked Derek Jeter in the balls. Still though, would you take him?
100%.
Absolutely.
Well, by the way,
because he was a good slap hitter, would have been perfect for Safeco Field. Perfect.
Those people that were ripping on Derek Jeter's defense have to be remembered that didn't happen until the end of his career. We're talking in 2010, he was slow to cover balls, and then in the offseason he changed out his workout routine and then came back again as one of the best defensive shortstops to ever do it again. I mean,
World Series year of 2009, he had some big lapses, but it was made up for with batting.
Right,
so
but the crazy thing is from 96 to 2006, Derek Jeter possibly was, next to Nomar Garciaparra, one of the best athletic shortstops. And a lot of people would say A-Rod, and I'm not taking anything away from A-Rod before he went to New York, because A-Rod was a phenomenal defender. But, the difference between A-Rod and Jeter was the fact that A-Rod was the better hitter. But Derek Jeter still was a phenomenal hitter, and that just backs up with his postseason play. I don't care what anybody says. Derek Jeter finishes with 3,000 hits. He's a Hall of Famer. Like anybody who wants to say that Derek Jeter is overrated clearly does not watch baseball.
Well, I think it was also. I think also the point of that video was to point out how don't live and die with metrics. That was actually their. I should have mentioned. I buried the lead. That was actually one of their bigger points was don't rely solely on metrics, because if you did, and you had denied that guy his time, come on.
So as we know that Dipoto did mention that selling was still on the table. Of course, we mentioned guys like Teoscar Hernandez. Obviously, AJ Pollock is not, it does not have any trade value. Same with Colton Wong. So those guys are DFA candidates. But the idea of buying while selling is essentially the idea of prospect for prospect type deals.
Yeah.
The Mariners do have a stockpile of pitching, whether they be starters or relievers. So, and I brought up the idea of trading for a guy like Gleyber Torres, who's still relatively young, where they could trade a guy like Tyler Dollard, who's I believe he was a third-round pick 2 years ago, and maybe trading from their depths of shortstop, because they just drafted two, but they also had Celestin, who I believe they drafted last year. That got a lot of harsh stares because they apparently the Mariners had to pay that kid, but I wasn't using that as a serious trade, just as a frame of buying while selling, where you can let go of some of your depth, because the Mariners have a lot of shortstop depth now. They also have a lot of starting pitching depth where they can turn around and make a deal like that, because as far as I'm concerned, at this point that would be right along the lines of what the Mariners do. When the Mariners basically built this core, if you remember, they went from the start of the rebuild in 2019 to a 90-win season 2 years later, and that was also when they had a fucked up COVID season in the middle. They literally cut down a rebuild to 2 seasons by staying ahead of the curve. What they would end up doing was they would ship off a player for prospects. They would turn around and flip those prospects for better personnel. They stayed ahead of the curve and put together a young core relatively quick. And so the framework for that would probably be the same model, where now that you know what you have in your minor league organization, you can start flipping those to fill the gaps. You need another outfield bat. Why not call the Yankees and see if what would it take to get Jason Dominguez out of Double A with them? Jason Dominguez is an absolute on-base machine with power. He's like one of the Yankees' top prospects, but he's also his first season in Double A. So it's not like the Yankees can turn around and ask for like two top 5 prospects. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, we're still talking about a relatively young prospect himself.
And we're talking about a Yankee team that still has postseason aspirations and might be a little more apt to go for something.
Right. Exactly.
Because the pressure on them to win is a little bit more than it is the Mariners. Well, it's probably a lot more than the Mariners, because their fans and media hold them accountable, unlike some teams dealt with.
But to me, that's the framework, right? This would be a good opportunity to continue to build to that young core with bringing in controllable young players. So, for instance, let's just say that they were able to get a left-handed outfield bat, a prospect. Maybe he's in AAA and he's ready to get called up. Or maybe they actually do trade with St. Louis to get Brendan Donovan, and you filled your second base hole, and you brought in another outfielder, and maybe they do flip Teoscar. You have set yourself up beautifully for this offseason.
Yeah.
At that point, you're not going into the offseason needing to fill holes. You're going into the offseason ready to potentially shop.
Do you start taking away from guys? Do you start looking at guys like a Cody Bellinger? I know that name has been thrown out there because that's. Are you going to be able to hold him? And if you did, I mean, whether or not, I mean, he's probably a bigger established name that you'd bring in if you really think that you're not out of it.
Right.
It's a name that I've seen. God, don't hate me for this, but it's a name that I've seen fans throw away. It's something that I've seen MLB.com or MLB Network in their trade rumors talking about as well. Don't know if that's on the table or not, but the Mets are going to be sellers. They're going to be trying to get rid of salary more than anything else. But here's the thing about getting prospects. If you're going to make trades for prospects, I guess you better do it now. Whether the off season should be where you're getting some firepower. The in season trades should be where the prospects are.
That's exactly right, and that's exactly what I just mentioned. Use this trade
deadline. Because it's a tough sell to fans.
But that being said, I can't help delusion, right? If you haven't been paying attention to this baseball team, then I can't help you, right? But that being said, that's what this traded. That's the framework of what I was just explaining. Using this trading deadline to set you up perfectly for the offseason. So all you have to do is shop in the offseason. You don't have to worry about trying to find Colton Wong or trying to fill gaps with aging veterans on 1-year deals. You already have that set in stone. But to answer your question, let me ask you this real quick. Would you like to have this? A player whose OBP is 369. He's slugging 549 and his OPS is 918. Does that interest you?
Yes. Anything over 850.
By the way, that's Cody Bellinger.
Okay.
Currently with the Cubs.
Yeah.
Yes. The answer is 100% yes.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, if you feel like you're in it.
But how many years does he have left on a contract? I mean, that's the other thing. Because a guy like that, to me, I would rather see him than Teoscar. I know Teoscar's, everybody. Good Lord, the guy had 3 decent games. Well, 3 good games, rather. To be fair, but he was in a horrendous slump, and now he's back. My God, 4 games does not back make. If anything, I think it if you want to cheer for Teoscar being back, be happy that he's got some trade value here with 7 days left before the deadline, instead of being for whatever the hell he was. He was in a pretty bad slump.
All right,
it was something to be. I'm going to look up his stats here, but for a while there, it was really something. He didn't have a home run for a long time, and when you're basically your job is to be a power guy. I mean, he had the home run against the Twins. The home run against the Twins, which was a huge game for him. Then he had 3 hits the next night. He had not had a home run since the extra inning loss to the Nationals on June 27th. That is a hell of a long time. He didn't have very many extra base hits either. Hell, he didn't have a whole lot of hits, period. Nor did he draw a massive amount of walks. But he sure struck out quite a few times.
To let you know, Cody Bellinger's base contract this year is $12 million. Season's already halfway over, so it's 6 the rest of the way. Okay. Next year, he's got a mutual option for $12 million. The luxury tax salary is 17.5. But it's a mutual contract. He's an unrestricted free agent in after the 2024 season.
So you'd have to have something You'd have to have a Luis Castillo type of thing where you trade for him with the intent of giving him a 3-year extension.
100%. Or you just make next year guaranteed. There's no mutual option. We'll give you a next year guaranteed, but we'll push it to 17, like a 17 guaranteed. Okay. And then you know what I mean? Something along the lines where next year is not mutual, it's guaranteed, and that still leaves the option of being a free agent 2025. Yeah. Okay.
Would I take it?
Yes, I would take. Yes,
I would. Yeah. I mean, right now I'd take anything. Right now, I would take anything. By the way, besides bringing a fucking pitcher up from Double-A.
Cody Bellinger right now, if he gets traded to Seattle, he is the best player on the team right now.
Yep.
Right now. Better than Julio, 100%.
If that happens, and I can't believe I'm saying this. If that happens, maybe you're not out of it, Steve. Maybe you peel off that 7. Maybe you win. Maybe you legitimately win 14 out of 19 games.
By the way, man,
14-game win streaks coming. Can you win 14 out of 18, 14 out of 20? Yeah.
So let me get this. So let me get this straight. If they traded for Cody Bellinger, you would start drinking the Kool-Aid. You start slurping.
For at least a week, yes. You know what? I would see it as a move in the right direction. I would see it as a positive move. Let me put it that way.
I'll tell you what.
It would be better than any move I've seen. It would be better than any move I've seen in the last 9 months.
Sure. I'll tell you what. If they traded Cody Bellinger, I'm 100% all on board.
Yeah.
Because that's a move. That's a move that you signal the fan base that you're not waving the white flag. That you're actually going to make a legitimate run.
Keeping that flag. That's exactly right. Instead of being right here, you're putting it down there.
That's exactly correct.
So
100%. 100%. But
I try not to be a hater, Steve. I really do.
Do I think that they're going to trade for Cody Bellinger? No. Do I think that they're? Do I think they've already? Hey,
I didn't think they were going to trade for Luis Castillo either. So.
Yeah, but when they traded for Luis Castillo, he wasn't making anything. He was brought in. I think at the $6 million price tag, right? They extended him this offseason.
So, that's got to be part of it, and that's got to be part of what they do. There's, you mentioned the mutual option for next year. You'd have to look at something because they're not in rent-a-player mode yet. And I don't think they'll ever be in rent-a-player mode. I really don't. I think that they kind of tout themselves as not being that.
I think that we're never going to see a big price free agent come to Seattle. I think because of the Robinson Cano deal, I think it put so much egg on their face. Because what did they really get out of that? Except for they owed him 5 seasons of salary at the end of that contract where he didn't play in a Mariner uniform.
The only saving grace in that is those 5 years. I think they were paying 10% of the salary, so they didn't have to. And the Mets were picking up the rest. Essentially, they found a sucker in the Mets to trade for him. I mean, that's it. Which they got their fleecing back. What did they get out of him? What
did they get out of him?
Some credibility out of the gate. A pretty good 14 season where they were in it. They were in playoff contention until I want to say the last 2 weeks of the season. There was a game in Toronto, or game against Toronto, where Felix was pitching, and they were in must-win territory. But I mean, they were right there. I mean, they were legitimately. I remember at work we were like, "Hey, man, let's start. We better start making some contingency playoff plans because this could happen."
Right.
And they were right there. And Felix, this is what we've been waiting for years. This is the moment Felix has been waiting for, a big game with something on the line. And he came out and he just got fucking hammersmithed in the Sky Dome by the Blue Jays in that game. And they get the shit beat out of them. And I think they went on. They started to lose towards the end and flubbed out. 2016, they were in it until the final Sunday of the season. They needed a win and an A's loss to force a 163rd game, one-game playoff with Oakland for the last wild card spot. And they won, but the A's won, so they were at it. So you had two playoff teasers is essentially what you got for Cano.
Well, here's what we got. Here's what we got for Cano. We got 5 years of paying a second baseman $24 million a year. A second baseman, not a first baseman, not a center fielder, not a pitcher, a second baseman. That's the first thing. The second
thing is,
hurt
and underperformed most of those years.
100%. Did he live up to the peripherals that he put up at Yankee Stadium? No, he did not. So we basically paid $24 million for 5 years. We paid $24 million a year for a little credibility and an all-star second baseman.
And the GM was fired a year later anyway. It bought him one more year. 2014 bought Zarenzik one more year, and then he was gone.
I will say this. I think it left them with egg on their face because those contracts really generally never work out to begin with anyways. And the idea that you're going to – I believe they were the only suitor that was willing to pay that type of contract to Robbie Cano. I don't even think the Yankees – of course, his value to the Yankees wasn't going to be as high. But that being said, I don't think there was any team in the league that was prepared to go above and beyond for Robinson Cano in that measure. So we overpaid, number one. But I think it had a lasting effect because when you listen to ownership, okay, so here's how this works, okay? This is exactly how this works. When the Mariners are not good, their salary remains low because obviously you don't have fans coming through the turnstiles, and so your budget is predicated on the profit the team makes. So when a team is profitable, your player budget might go up it should go up 4%, but with the Mariners it's like 2.
Sure.
So the Mariners have a hard line budget that Dipoto and Hollander are forced to create something within. They're not going to go above and beyond that. We've seen that back in the early 2000s with Pat Gillick. Crazy. What's crazy is that Bavasi had a hardline budget that he had to follow. And when he spent money, it was because the year before they lost those salaries that they brought in were able to offset. And I would probably assume that he had Zrenzik probably had to get the okay in order to get that contract.
I'm sure he did.
100%.
But they were in PR save-ass mode because they already had egg on their face from the whole Sonics
100%.
thing, the whole
100%.
complaint about parking, the whole
And I
thing where
think that's
Chuck
a little
Armstrong
different.
said the biggest
Yeah.
complaint I hear from fans is parking, to which that was one of the last things that actually united all Mariner fans. Where they all went, what? How about the biggest complaint is you put a team together that's capable of getting to the playoffs and winning. It showed the out-of-touchness that team's, I don't know, is that a word, out-of-touchness? The out-of-touchness that organization had, and I think to an extent still has. Still has. And you mentioned budget. The local media contract is almost 100% profit because the regional sports network, which they own, is theirs. But, and I don't know, I've worked in television for 24 years. I worked at a cable news outlet for 3 years, so I don't know how the hell no one saw this coming back in 2008, that people were going to start getting rid of their cable and satellite. And what that means is that's less money per subscriber going to a Root Sports.
Sure.
Hashtag the Mariners and AT&T Sports and Discovery, who owns them now. I know there's been tons of ownership changes that have gone through with that channel, but that's less dollars that are going into your pocket. Your RSNs the teams have are, I don't want to say failing. They're on the verge of it. A couple have. Arizona's failed. That's money that the team is not getting anymore. It's money that you projected to have for 10 to 15 years and you're not getting. Again, how in the hell anybody that works in television didn't see this coming? I really, really don't know. If the Mariners had anybody that was looking at such a thing, I don't know how they didn't see it coming, but it does affect the bottom line, and I think it's made them cheaper than normal in the last 5 years.
What's
unfortunate consequence.
I read this article 2 weeks ago, and this was coming from this was coming from Keith Law, who was basically saying that each major league team every single season benefits from their regional sports deals by the tune of $60 million. Now, of course, that's not every team, but if you figure the Mariners own they own Root Sports, you probably figure that number might be a little higher. On top of the fact that every Major League Baseball team, because of the national TV deal, gets like $160 million just for laying in the cut. And because the Mariners have had back-to-back 90-win seasons, and they went to a playoff game, they hosted a playoff game last year, and now all of a sudden you're getting 3 to 4 million fans coming through the turnstiles this year.
There's still been some games that have been low. They're gonna draw 2.7 million for sure.
Sure. But last year they were the most profitable team in baseball, and I'm sure this year they're going to be again the most profitable team in baseball. But the payroll stays the same. Like you can't take anything for face value with the Mariners because I'll give you a good example. 2 years ago in 2021, I think they had like an $87 million payroll in 2021. Okay. This year it's $136 million. Do you know what rank they went from? They went from 24th to 19th. They're not even within the top. They're not even within the top 15 of Major League Baseball, right? But what it is it went up. I think it went up $48 million. And so the Mariners are going to. And the Mariners
for 4 spots.
But the Mariners will say, "Hey, look, guys, we spend." But what they're not saying is they've only spent like one free agent. The guy that makes the most money was the one free agent that they signed, which was Robbie Ray, and he's the only player on this team that makes above $20 million. The next player, the next highest paid player, would be Teoscar Hernandez, who made, I think, $16 million this year. But the rest of those were in arbitration raises. Most of that salary was in arbitration raises, and then all obviously renegotiations with players that the Luis Castillo they extended that and the Julio deal.
Which they didn't even need to do.
They didn't even need to do. And the crazy thing about it is, like, you can't take anything that the Mariners say for face value, because are they spending money? I guess yes, technically, because their payroll went up, but it was not from outside talent. It was 100% arbitration raises, extensions, and there's been really one free agent that they chased, which was Robbie Ray, and I still don't understand, because he was the reigning AL Cy Young award.
Yeah.
And they were willing to pay him. There was better pitchers on that market, by the way, besides Robbie Ray.
Yeah.
Just saying. And what have they got? By the way, what have they gotten from Ray? A mediocre 2022, and now he's hurt. So when he comes back next June,
did he even make it through one start this year?
Was it the
first start he got hurt?
It was the first. He came out of his first start.
Okay. So less than 3 innings.
Less than
for
3
$20+
innings.
million, and you might not have him till next June.
Correct. Because it's Tommy John, right? So
Yes.
then, at the end of next season, he can opt in for the final 3.
Which now he will probably do, because his market value on the open market has plummeted.
If the Mariners were smart, they would make that some other team's problem. Like, I would be looking for ways to trade Robbie Ray.
Yeah, boy, can you do that with getting around his physical? I mean, time's
well,
gonna
no,
tell.
I'm not talking about right now. I'm talking about next season.
But even this coming off season is what I was thinking of more.
Right.
Yeah, make that some other team's problem by the next trading deadline, by July 31st, 2024.
Yeah.
Unless he comes back and it's just gangbusters. Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing
that. I don't see that happening. We're talking about a dude that overthrows everything. He's
Lord knows there's plenty of pitchers in AA coming up who can pitch.
Oh, so you're not. So let me get this straight. You're not happy about the Prelander, Baroa, Devin Sweet call up?
Well, you know what? If you're okay, if you're selling and you got to see the young arms, that's fine. But then 3 games later, where you win against the Blue Jays, who are ahead of you in the wild card standings, and then you pimp that up about how we had a chance to get within 2.5 of them. Okay, well then, what is this really about? It goes back to what we were talking about earlier. No, I wasn't. I mean,
I
was for those guys, especially Devin Sweet making his his major league debut, Isaiah Campbell a little bit earlier. I can't think of a season for the life of me where we've had this many pitchers make their MLB debut. A lot of Mariner players have made MLB debuts in the last 4 seasons, going back to 2020.
Sure.
And if you're a young team looking to build that way, that's fine. I don't have anything against that. But a contending team having this many players, MLB debut for Brian Wu, MLB debut for Bryce Miller, MLB debut for the one pitcher that they also brought up from AA. He pitched once.
In Toronto. And he got hurt with the.
He got injured.
Yeah.
It's very well. I keep wanting to say Emerson Hancock. That's not it.
No. But, it's hold on real quick. It's gonna bug me now that I don't know it.
I know it's gonna bug me too. That's why I'm gonna cheat on the internet. I'm gonna look at baseballreference.com because this guy's name escapes me. He actually did pitch pretty well, and I was very pleased to see. But this busload of guys that you're bringing up from AA, this is your answer to anything. It just bugs the hell out of me. Driving me crazy. Let me look at pictures. Easton McGee. That's who it is.
Easton McGee. There you go.
Yeah, 60-day IL. But you have had 6 guys make their MLB debut for your team this year, and typically teams that are headed to the postseason don't have that happen.
Correct.
So,
well,
I'm not a fan. I mean, if this is the best you've got, it's not good enough.
Well, I will say this. Like, I assumed Burrow was going to come up at some point this season, but I thought it was going to be post-deadline.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be post-deadline if they traded one of their members of the bullpen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, if they were going to get rid of, I hate to say this, but let's just, for shits and giggles, let's just say that they traded Paul Sewald. Then I would probably assume that you would see Prelander Baroa. Yeah. At that point, post-deadline. But pre-deadline, and what I didn't like about it was they brought up Sweet, they brought up Baroa, and then 2 days later, because I think they sent Campbell down.
Yep. And then brought him back up.
And then 2 days later, they put Baroa back down in double. Like, what was the point?
I know. You just burned an option.
You burned. That's exactly right. You burned a kid's option. And I think he actually get into a game. I think he got touched up in one of those Blue Jays. No, Baroa. I think he got.
He walked three guys in 2/3 of an inning the other day.
There you go. Yeah. There you go. Yeah, you got. Yeah. Like, what was the point? What was the point of calling him up, putting him in not a good position to succeed? He doesn't succeed, and then you ship him right back. What was the point?
I think one of the things they've done, and this goes towards service time manipulation, or at least that's what the players would say. You're giving that guy some time up, and if you get him enough time up and enough innings, you protect him from the Rule 5 draft.
Oh, yeah.
So the guy isn't stuck down there. Yes. I think there's a lot of that going on in Major League Baseball, and I think the Mariners have really dug deep into that.
I would 100%. Well,
the amount of guys coming up from Double-A is amazing. Now, and I know there's the whole thing of, well, they don't have their best pitchers in Triple-A because the numbers get inflated because of the high altitudes that they play at. Well, if you can strike people out and you can pitch well, you should be good enough. Yeah, the numbers are okay. What's your ERA going to be in the Southern League? 2.30. What's it going to be in the PCL? 3.1, maybe less than 1 ERA more. And is that what it's about? It's about protecting your numbers. I mean, it should be about developing players. That's what Dipoto and Hollander always say. Scott Service says it too.
Right.
So, I don't know. I think it has something to do with manipulating around keeping guys ineligible for the Rule 5 draft.
Well, we also know that the Mariners 100% do that. They did it. They did it with Kelnick. You remember that?
Oh yeah.
They
bragged about it on camera. Kevin Mather bragged about it on camera.
Kevin Mather bragged. Yeah,
ended up losing his job, which was about 15 years too late. It was about time he was fired.
That was funny. All right. Well, we are getting towards the end of the show, so you know what time it is, Swanee. Winners and losers.
Winners and losers time? Mm-hmm. You go first.
All right. You know what? I'm actually going to say my winner today is Teoscar Hernandez.
Fair.
Here's what I mean. And everybody understands this about me. Am I a fan of Teoscar? Not even in the slightest. But I give credit where credit's due. And he actually had a pretty solid homestand altogether. I think he had the game. I think he had the game winner in the opener of the Toronto series.
It was a walk-off.
Yeah, it was the walk-off. Has he shown flashes of the power peripheral? No, but he's actually making pretty solid contact, and he's actually putting the ball in play, which is a far cry from the first two and a half months of the season when he wasn't doing anything of anything.
And he had a huge game-winning two-run double in Saturday's 9-8 win, which turned out to be the difference in the game. But it goes to show when that position actually produces, there are some positive results to be looked at. And you can't help but wonder, boy, what if 8 to 14 games he would have produced with runners in scoring position? Yeah. You know, you are looking at a different thing. It really that's why I get so burnt out when they pass off a loss. Sometimes you lose some. Every game must be important. every game must be important.
100%.
Which I think is why some players get mad when they're pissed off that they lose and they kick Gatorade bottles, which probably leads to your loser of the week.
Are you going to give me your winner?
I'll give you my winner real quick, and you're going to laugh at this, but I'm going to go with Mike Ford. And I know that everybody loves the fact that he hit 2 home runs off the Hit It Here Cafe, but he did raise his. Here's what I liked. He did raise his OPS from 765 to 931. He did. He had a horrible one of the games against Minnesota. He sombreroed, but he has played a lot better. And when there's been production from the DH and right field, which are 2 key offensive positions,
100%.
you do see better results. So reluctantly, I'm going to give him my winner because it was good to see, and I do want to see him have some success. Is he the DH of the future for this team? I don't think so. Not unless he came with a really cheap price tag and there's nobody else. But it is good to see some results out of there because I saw what he's capable of when he was down in Tacoma. And I was hoping some of it, at least a portion of it, would translate here and there in the majors. And I saw that this week. Will it hold up? We'll wait and see. But I would give him my winner of the week.
I actually think it has translated. So, from the time that he got called up, he didn't get off to the greatest start, but I think a week and a half in, 2 weeks in, he actually started putting bat to ball. Has he been consistent? Not really.
No.
But he's producing a little bit.
Yeah.
By the way, if Mike Ford is our starting DH in the 2020 opening, if he's the starting DH on the opening day roster for the 2024 season, something went terribly wrong.
Yeah.
Something went terribly wrong. My loser. Yeah, man, I'll say it. It's in my name. Yeah, Jared Kelenic, man. I'm sorry. I don't listen. Kicking a dead horse is not my thing, but I'll tell you what, you really fucked your team over by doing that. And I love the damage control the Mariners did by saying that he actually fractured the foot on a foul ball earlier.
Really? I didn't hear that one.
Yeah. Service was saying that that the injury really occurred when he fouled the ball off his foot, and I was like, wait a second, doesn't he wear a foot protector?
That's the bullshit meter right there.
Oh yeah, it's a spin
needle rising on that one. He came out. He came out in pregame on Thursday at 9 a.m. and basically, I mean, he copped to it. Good on him for that, which is more than I can say for them. I did not hear that one. Oh my Lord.
But you know what? A lot of fans appreciate the passion from him. But you know what, man? Fuck you, dude. Like, it's bad enough that you tailed off over the course of the last month and a half after a solid start to the season. Like, I was the first one to praise Jared Kelenic for his start because it was a far cry. I actually went so far as to say that if he kept that pace, not only would he be a Mariner All-Star representative, but he was going to be in the running for AL Comeback Player of the Year.
Absolutely.
That was that kind of start. He tailed off. Okay. Then, because you can't control your fucking emotions, you kick a fucking water cooler and put the Mariners already needed help to begin with. And now they lose an outfielder until September, which means you put your GM in a position where he has to do something to replace it. Because Taylor Trammell, I'm sorry, man, I like Taylor Trammell, but that's not gonna work out. We've seen Taylor Trammell to a point where we know exactly what we're gonna get from him.
Too many strikeouts, and he has problems against left-handers. Whereas
Correct.
Kelenic was hitting better against left-handers.
It's left-handers, right? But now you put your own GM and your own team behind the 8-ball because you couldn't control your fucking emotions. You know what? I appreciate the fact that you took accountability, but you know what? There's a good potential that this injury could potentially derail the season.
Derail the season, derail the off-season plans, derail his contract that he would have eventually gotten in 2 more years. Especially if this turns into a nagging injury. I like his passion. I've said this before. I like that he's fired up. I like that he's pissed off. I like that Mike Ford cussed out an umpire the other night when he struck out because he was complaining about the pitches being low, which were low.
They were low.
But you just got to be a little bit smarter. Use the baseball bat and beat the hell out of the cooler.
You know what's crazy?
Not your foot.
His first two seasons, he was taken out of the lineup and sent down to Tacoma for poor play. Mm-hmm. He couldn't hang in the lineup for his first 2 seasons, and now in this 3rd season, he can't hang in the lineup due to an injury. Like, there was a reason why they got rid of Mitch Haniger, because he couldn't stay in the fucking lineup.
Can't stay in the lineup because of an injury and an injury you caused, which makes it even worse.
That makes it even worse.
The damage control from the Mariners, but I guess I shouldn't be the least bit surprised.
Right. And of course, the Mariners are going to try to spin it like he's got passion. Fuck the spin. Keep it real. And you're absolutely right. He's potentially ruining his long-term viability with this team. And I said it before. I would have been okay if they traded Kelenic this offseason.
I like Kelenic. Now his trade value, even going into next year,
and you know what's going to happen
is nil.
And you know what's going to happen when he comes back. You know what's going to happen when he comes back. He is the rest of the season. He's going to have to use the rest of the season to try to get his stride back. And by the end of the rest of the season, they're going to be done. And then he's got to wait an entire offseason to start over again.
And when you injure your left foot and you're a left-handed hitter, it's your plant foot. The bulk of the weight when you're in the batter's box is on that foot. So it's another thing that's not going to help. That's a banner. That's a loser banner that would be flying on a plane over there. I'm going to go with my losers of the week. I got to go with the Dipoto Hollander duo for the pitchers that were brought up that you mentioned earlier. At least Isaiah Campbell, who has been up, and I know that kind of oddly enough, fans have kind of crapped on him. He's got 5 innings in 5 games and hasn't given up a run. I mean, it's a small sample size, but
sure,
we're certainly seen worse. The Burrell thing signals. I mean, that's a move for late August or early September.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
2/3 of an inning, 3 walks. Devin Sweet, 1 inning, 2 earned runs, a home run against Minnesota in a game that was still winnable. And he gave up a home run, and they ended up losing that game. That was also the game where they were tied, and they decided to keep Colton Wong in the game instead of putting in a pinch hitter, and he struck out. Right. And it's just games like that where you look like is service folding. I mean, but then suddenly they win the next day. That was Wednesday night. They win Thursday, then they win Friday, then they win Saturday, and then the spin mode completely flips around. They lose Sunday, but that post game yesterday was talked about as if they went 8-2 or 7-3 on this homestand. All positive. We got our confidence back. Julio said we're playing with confidence. Playing with confidence. You went to the ALDS last year. You were supposed to go to the ALCS this year.
Right.
Why are you playing with confidence now? You should have had confidence in the 17th inning of last year's Game 3 of the ALDS and pushed a run across the plate and at least forced another game at home. So, but bringing up the AA bus, just a fucking enough is enough. Enough is enough.
Well, by the way,
this guy up. Let's move that. If you're in tryout mode, if you've waved the flag and you're in tryout mode, then I get it. If you're done, I get it. When you turn around, Dipoto's talking about getting, we didn't do the moves we made and selling's off the, we're buying's off the table, and then 3 wins is all it takes you to turn the spin move around. I can't wait till Dipoto's when he goes on Seattle Sports 710 again this coming week. I'm dying to know if his message is going to change. But him and Hollander, and Hollander will probably end up taking the bullet sometime at, if not this offseason, next offseason. I don't see him sticking around because he's just, that's a job you take to set up as a fall guy. When the GM becomes higher than the GM and hires you as a GM, well, if you don't win, something's going to go wrong. So Dipoto, Hollander, my losers.
I will say this, though, right? When you're seeing this much movement from AA to the big leagues, I don't know about you, but that tells me that this team lacks serious depth.
Yeah. Which is odd because pitching is supposed to be where their depth is. And I think it is, but you're also, everybody's hiding their guys in AA. Instead of having them against a little bit better competition. It inflates their numbers. Maybe it's a trade value thing, because if you've ever watched a AA game or seen anything below AAA, and there's gaps in between each, and then you get to the majors and the gap is obviously a lot higher. But I don't give a fuck what people say. The minors is the minors. No, there's a difference between AA hitters and AAA hitters.
100%.
AA hitters, their strike zone is from their eyebrows or higher, their eyebrows to their shoelaces. They will swing at anything.
Right.
AAA, it's probably from the letters to the knees. It's a little bit better, and you're also facing guys who actually have played in the majors before, hitters who've been in the majors before.
Yeah.
So this notion, and the Mariners are not the only team doing this, but it's just, okay. Yeah, but a lot of Brian Wu's had success coming up. They're gonna get figured out unless they continue to improve as well. Which I think they will.
But a lot of teams use their AAA as well too.
A lot of teams use their AAA a lot more. Last I checked, the Reno Aces have a pretty good AAA setup, and Arizona's not bad. Salt Lake's been pretty good, and the Angels have had some pretty good players come up out of there. So
you said that you had multiple losers, so I'm curious to find out what your other loser was.
Oh well, you know what? I had some picks to go through. I was actually going to say Ty France again. I know he had a couple of hits, but he also had an ejection complaining about balls and strikes. And it's like, you're not helping yourself. If you're pissed about a called strike that was a couple inches high, you have not helped. That happened earlier this week. You're not helping yourself when you're also swinging at things that are 6 inches outside, because those pitchers are going to nibble, and you can't leave it up to the umpires.
Right.
And for him to bitch and complain and get ejected from a game, again, look at the passion. I love the passion. Hit the fucking ball. You should be a better hitter than you were. His numbers had just, as we talked about earlier, his numbers have plummeted. I got to throw Ty France in my loser pile again. I know he had a couple RBIs and I had a couple of hits. A couple of them were clutch. But still, it's so subpar this season. He's just been a massive disappointment. A guy that was an all-star, that right now, I don't think they will do this, but right now, this is a guy that maybe Steve is trade bait. Maybe. But you don't have anything to take his place. So probably not, but he's playing like trade bait.
The most disappointing thing about Ty is the fact that even with some of our struggling offensive performers, there was pockets at some point during the season where they had a good week, or they had a good couple weeks before they tailed back off again. We saw that with Julio a little bit in June. He kind of picked it up for a little bit, before kind of regressing again. Same with Teoscar. Suarez had some good pockets of success, but Ty France is the only player this season that has never really had a pocket of success. You can't point to a stretch during the season where you're like, oh yeah, Ty was really kicking the shit out of the ball, so what happened? Like, he's been pretty non-existent all season.
To pile on Teoscar a little bit, and this is going to sound like I'm being mean, but I don't know if you saw this on Saturday. But one of the runs the Blue Jays scored was thanks to an error by him. It was a ground ball base hit to right field, and he's running in to scoop the ball with his left hand and make a throw home, and he whiffs on the scoop.
Oh.
And there was a runner at second. It was a shallow grounder. So they were gonna hold. In fact, I think the Blue Jays did initially hold might have been Alejandro Kirk, hold him at third base, but then Teoscar's running in and he goes he whiffs on the scoop, and the run scores, and it ended up being a massive difference in the game. And just kind of, I'm looking, just shaking my head, going, "Are you kidding me?" And it might even have been yesterday. It just was like, dude, what are you doing? I know he's a defensive liability, but you got to make up with the bat. Mitch Haniger would not have effed that up. That's all I'm saying.
No.
So, anyway.
Where have you gone, Mitch Haniger?
I know. Your trivia question is, I love the on-deck trivia questions. Those are some of my favorites.
Before we get to the trivia question to close it out, the Mariners embark on a 6-game road trip, 3 in Minnesota, 3 in Arizona, before coming back to play 3 at home against Boston. So the next 9 games, how do you see it? Minnesota 3, Arizona 3, Boston 3.
Well, they finally get a day off on Thursday, so that's good. It's one of their only days off in about a stretch of about 22 days. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that those 6 games at Minnesota, at Arizona, they go 3-3, because this team seems to be a 500 team. But when they come home and play against Boston, I think that's when the other shoe drops. And, like we're talking about how they play up to their competition.
That's
I think
exactly
in that
right.
one I think they might take an ass kick in there. I see a 4 and 5 stretch in that. Probably 3-6 maybe, but I'll say 4-5.
I got them losing 2 out of 3 at Minnesota because, again, they play down to their competition. Arizona's a pretty good team, man. Arizona is actually a really fun team to watch. They're aggressive. They're super
Corbin
aggressive.
Carroll, fun player to watch too.
First pitch fastball hitting, they do hit. They steal bases. They play the hit and run. They put the game in motion. And I will say this: they lose 2 of 3 in Minnesota. They lose 2 of 3 in Arizona. And they come back and take 2 out of 3 against Boston. So I'm going to have them at 4-5 on this 9-game stretch.
I'm going to say this too. It's a good thing that Bryce Miller isn't facing Arizona. He pitches Wednesday against the Twins because if his fastball against Arizona, that would get ugly. That would get real ugly.
That would get
but Brian
really
Wu
ugly.
pitches on Saturday against Arizona. It'd be interesting to see if they can get to him. I think they will. And I see Boston coming back, and then it's right back on the road against LA, against the Angels, and for 4. So
I don't like that. I don't like that series either.
We're going to find out a lot about this team in the next
team.
13 games there, Steve.
Oh, yeah. But you know what's? Oh God, I can't stand that. All right,
42-21 the rest of the way. That's what's going to take for 90 wins.
It's not going to happen.
No.
All right, so the answer to the trivia question is, let me actually just rephrase the question. All right, so the double. The 95 double, Edgar Martinez laces one down. By the way, who were they facing? Who was he facing when he hit it? Who did he hit it off of?
McDowell.
Jack McDowell, thank you very much. He hits it down the left field line, scoring Cora, scoring Junior, but if he didn't hit the double, who was on deck?
Alex Rodriguez. He had come in.
Alex Rodriguez.
Alex Rodriguez. Come in for Felix Fermin. Yeah. No, I love the on deck trivia question. In fact, I mentioned the one about Hank Aaron. I was wrong. I said it was Joe Torre. It was actually Dusty Baker on deck.
Dusty Baker.
When for the Braves when Hank Aaron hit home run number 756. But let's say for example Edgar gets a sac fly and ties that game, and then Rodriguez comes up and somehow gets Griffey home. Is his legacy in Seattle any different?
100%. 100%. That legacy is a little bit different because you actually okay. Well, let's say this. Let's say that you're absolutely right. Let's say that Edgar hits a sacrifice fly and it ties the game, and A-Rod is the one that drives Junior home. Okay, but he still does the exact same thing after the 2000 season. Do you think the Mariners would be even remotely fantasizing about 1995 as they still do with Edgar in the double, and it was A-Rod the one that did it? Do you think that they would be all gung ho about the 95 divisional series?
Not if A-Rod would have left after 2000, but I also think maybe there would have been a little bit more pressure on the organization to extend A-Rod in 98 or 99 and had him locked up more.
Yeah.
But that would have facilitated. Griffey would have been probably gone a year earlier. But they wanted Griffey. They wanted Griffey for the Safeco opener. But they knew they couldn't keep both. I think they would have made the decision earlier to commit to A-Rod. A-Rod had Scott Boras, if I was remembering, and I don't know. They still would have had to break the bank. It would have been 225 million or whatever. What was it? 252 million?
250. 250. No, 252.
252, I think.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, 10-year contract that he didn't even see the end of. Most people don't realize that there was an opt-out there, and he ended up re-signing with the Yankees.
You're right. And the Yankees, he re-signed for the Yankees for 254.
Yes. Yeah. So I think the Mariners probably would have been just too much heat on the organization to let that linger. I think they would have had him under a new contract after the 98 season. Which would have thrown a monkey wrench into any Griffey plans, but there were.
By the way, though, even if Griffey leaves leaves a year early, they probably still have the same success until through 2003, and who knows? Maybe maybe the Mariners catch the Angels with A-Rod in 2002, and the Angels don't win the World Series.
Yeah.
All right, before we go, I got a quick one for you. I think you're gonna like this. In 1969, the Major League Baseball expanded. They put a team in Seattle by the name of the Pilots.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? In spring training, they traded a young player who would go on to win the AL Rookie of the Year. Who was it?
Was it Lou Piniella?
It was 100% Lou Piniella.
Okay, yeah. I remember
Mariner
him
manager.
talking about that because he was one of the few ties between the Pilots and Mariners. There was only a handful. I mean, Diego Segui was one.
Diego Segui was one.
Segui and Gorman Thomas was actually a draft pick by the Pilots.
Oh,
Ended up playing for the Brewers for a number of years, and then came to Seattle in the 80s. Yeah.
Well,
Sweet Lou.
that's exactly right. All right, well, that's going to do it for us this week. Next week, we will be back, and hopefully we have... You know what? By the way, but we've been doing this for 7 weeks now, 6-7 weeks, something like that. And when we started this, they were in the exact same position as they are today. So next week,
might have been maybe a game worse.
Next week when we come back, are they going to be right around 500, or are they, or is it going to be?
I don't think 500 next Monday when we take this.
Agree.
Yeah, I agree. It's going nowhere, and I'm going to sit there and do the math again and go, hey, you know what? They got to win. They got to go 39-18 the rest of the way. I mean,
last week we had the L counter, right? It was 25. They only could have 25 more losses.
Yep.
And it didn't.
You can only have 21 more to reach 92 wins, which I still think it's probably going to take 94. But I'm just, in the interest of being mathematically mediocre and generous, finding the median of it, I'm going to say 92. But it's you're spinning the wheels in the mud and you're not going anywhere. And was this last 4 games? A prelude to maybe them getting hot or something like that. You know what? It's possible if Mike Ford keeps hitting decent, Teoscar's hitting decent. You're going to continue to get good starting pitching. I mean, Gilbert got rocked around a little bit. So did on Saturday. So did Kevin Gausman. So that was tit for tat. Could they? Yeah, but I mean, there's nothing I look at and go, I've got a feeling this is it. Some people do. The organization certainly does. And they say they're playing with confidence now. Okay.
Right.
We're going to see how confident they are. We're going to learn a lot about this team in the next 10 days.
We're going to see a lot about this team.
I seriously, I want to punch a TV when I hear that. I want to take fists and physically damage a TV. But I won't hit it too hard, unlike Jared Kelnick with a left foot onto a floor. Because I don't want to hurt the team, Steve. I don't want to hurt the team.
That's going to do it for us. Join us next week. You guys have a sexy week. All right, we're out.